All right. So anyway, we didn't do a whole lot on Monday, but if you joined the Zoom yesterday, then I went over some things about like uh, basics of the ocean itself. In section 2 of the book, section 2 of chapter 1, there's a thing about um, ocean exploration and about sailors and explorers and whatnot. I have this document that's in the chapter 1 folder. It says how Columbus got lucky. So here's the thing. The Earth has known to be round like a sphere for a really long time. That's not a modern thing. It's not like Columbus discovered that or anything like that. But it turns out that it wasn't actually until 1490 that the first globe was made. And the person who made it was named Martin Benine. And he was actually a German. And the globe was actually made in 1490. So if you know when like Columbus sailed the ocean blue, that was 1492. So it turns out that the first globe ever was made just a couple years before Columbus made his first voyage. And the thing about that globe is it kind of got a lot of stuff right. This is a picture of the globe, but it doesn't look so good. But this is an image of if you take the globe and you peel it back and you kind of do some color correction and make it look kind of better. And what this globe shows, this is the 1490 globe. You might recognize some things. This is Africa right here, and it looks pretty good because it turns out that even until the 1500s, European explorers had traveled all along all the coasts of Africa, of Asia, of Europe. Mostly, this is a map made by a German. So this is people who are sailing from Northern Europe up here, you know, traveling through the Mediterranean, traveling around the coast of Africa. And, you know, when you go around the globe, it goes this way and then it comes back to this side. So all of this up here is Europe. And then there's like Turkey is here and Asia's all this and Asia's over here. And then it turns out there's something big that's missing from this globe. Yeah. There's no South America. There's no North America. It's just not there. You know what I mean? Like, where should America be? It should be like in here. So in 1490, Europeans had no clue this continent even existed. Not a clue. In fact, the assumption was there wasn't a continent there. The assumption was that if you leave Europe and you head west in the ocean, you get to Asia. And you know that, like, you know, Native Americans also are known as, earlier on were known as Indians, which is confusing because it's like there's India, but they're Indians. So which India is it? And honestly, Europeans were confused. They were like, we think we made it to Asia. We're pretty sure these are Asian people. Except, it's like, why was Columbus? Why were Europeans trying to go to Europe, like across the ocean? What are they trying to get? Yeah. Yeah, trade route. So what are you trying to buy or sell? What are you trying to get? Yeah. Spices. Yeah, gold if you can get it. Gold's always nice. Silk, dyes. There's valuable stuff that ends up in Europe that comes from Asia. And the deal is, if you can just, instead of like going across land, you can just go across water, you might be able to get it quicker, you might be able to make some more money on it, that whole kind of thing. So the whole premise of Columbus's voyage, and Columbus was actually born in Genoa, which is now Genoa, Italy, hired by the Spanish. And it turns out that when he sailed the ocean blue, he didn't actually leave from Spain. Instead, the smart place to leave from is down in the Canary Islands off the west coast of Africa. So where Columbus sailed the ocean blue from is from like off the west coast of Africa, and then headed west. And it turns out, according to this map, he should like run into Asia and then find people that have like spices and silk and maybe some gold, you know, good stuff. Take that back to Europe, and he's like a hero. But when Columbus sailed the ocean blue and headed west, he unfortunately didn't find Asia. So he found no spices, and he found no gold, he found no silk, He's like, yo, I'm here for some silk. They're like, I don't know what that means. We don't have it. He's like, but I'm sure I'm in the right place. I mean, not necessarily in English or those kind of words. And here's the big story. It's not as if like North and South America were just not known, but this map, this globe, also has another big problem. And that's that if you put North and South America like right here in the middle, it makes these oceans really tiny. The problem with the map and the problem that Europeans had as an assumption is that they thought Asia was way bigger than it really is. And it goes like this. This is a story about economics and a story about like trade and a story about discovery. But it goes like this. You want to buy something right now, you can go online, go on Amazon, just like buy something, it ships to you, it's no big deal. The shipping cost is relatively low. But if the year is like 1400 and you're trying to move products from like, China, Japan, India, all the way from Eastern Asia, all the way across Asia, all the way up to Europe, you go by land. You got to like load it on animals. You got to put it on your back. You got to move the stuff. And no single person would move it the whole way. In other words, it wasn't people from China that would like load the stuff up and go the whole way. That's not how it works. Instead, some people would move the cargo some distance and then, sell it to somebody else and they move it some distance. They sell it to somebody else and move it some distance. And it's the same today. If you want to get paid a lot for moving stuff, you want to impress people with how difficult it was to do. You want to be like, it was a long, difficult, arduous journey. I'm going to need a lot of money. I had to move this stuff 100 miles. And to be honest, all these traders, they were ripping each other off. Because the guy who said, I walked 100 miles to bring this to you, might have only walked 10 or 20. Because you didn't know how far he came. If they're all telling you how far they're coming every time and they're consistent about it, they basically keep ripping you off, then by the time the goods make it to Europe, all the goods had been traded by people who had cumulatively said, we had to go 7,000 miles to bring it here, when in fact it might have only gone 3. So Europeans thought that Asia was enormous. And the whole point of trying to like leave Europe, go across the ocean and get to Asia was, well, this isn't that far across water. We ought to be able to do it. But all those traders had been like ripping each other off. It's how you make money. You gotta like be like, it's tough to do. It's like this. If you can put an envelope or put a letter in an envelope, put a stamp on it, the U.S. Postal Service will take it anywhere in the country. So 51 cents, right? But if I told you, I need you to hand deliver this piece of paper to somewhere in California, and you're only allowed to get there on foot, and it's got to be you, there's no way you're doing it for 51 cents, right? How much would you want me to give you to take this paper by foot to California? Like, how much time would it take you to walk to California? You got to walk back, right? It takes a long time. Like if I told you I'd give you $1,000 to walk this to California, no way, not a single one of us. You couldn't even afford. I mean, you'd go through $1,000 worth of shoes and food, right? You'd never, not nothing. You'd have nowhere to stay. If I give you 10 grand, would you walk up to California? Maybe still not, right? You're not. So today we have this economy of scale where we've got airplanes and we gather it all together and move it. But if it's the year 1400, you're walking stuff places, people are going to want to get a lot of money, and they're also going to be like, it was a big tough job. Okay, so here's the story, I guess. This is the whole point, and it's the story that's not really told about Columbus. This is the Earth as we see it today, like the regular globe and or the regular like map of the Earth. So here's North America, South America, and then here's Europe, and then there's Asia. So really, what we're talking about are trade routes that begin in Eastern Asia, like Japan, China, Mongolia, India, Vietnam, Cambodia. This region in here is areas where all those like valuables were then taken to Eastern or to Western Europe. So these land routes are established through many countries, well, modern countries, these different places where things are traded. Some people are just working trading. Some people are nomads that happen to be going somewhere. They're like, well, we're taking our flock of sheep down this way, so we'll just take this with us, make a little extra cash. But this distance from East Asia or from Eastern Asia all the way to Europe was considered to be much, much bigger. How much bigger? Well, here's what I've done. This is what like the Europeans thought it was more like in the year 1400. So what I did is I took this map, and then I just stretched it. And by stretching it a lot, I've now made the distance from like Europe across and then to this way much bigger. And then this ocean's not so hard to cross. This is kind of like, I know it's kind of weird looking, but I've got one transparent layer on the other. Uh, Europe and Africa are kind of in the right place. And then I stretched Asia out and just got rid of North and South America. So here's the reality. When Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, if North and South America wasn't here, they probably wouldn't have made it. They would have, instead of it being 3,000 miles, it's more like 10,000 miles. They would not have had enough food, provisions. They've been like, well, we've got to have gotten there by now. And they're going, it's like another 3 months. And they're like, we still haven't found land. They could have just been lost and died at sea. So the thing about ocean exploration and how it relates to oceanography is all the while these explorers do anything, they're making observations of the seas, they're making observations about weather, they're fishing for different, animals and stuff like that. Much of our exploration of the world is reliant and dependent and related to ocean travels. And that's kind of the big story. So the real story of Columbus is, well, okay, he made 4 trips to North America. He never set foot on what is now the continental United States. He was only down in the Caribbean. And like the population of North and South America exceeded that of Europe in 1492. It wasn't that there were just a few Native Americans here. And it's difficult to know precisely, but the mean average estimate is around 64 million people. It could have been as high as 100 million people inhabited this continent, and Europe only had 50 million people. It's possible there are actually twice as many people living in North America as like were living in Europe at the time. So it began this age of discovery. It began transmission of disease. It began movement of crops. In fact, here's a funny bit of history. This globe is called the Erdefall in German, literally meaning earth apple. And if you speak German or you've like studied German, you might know this word means potato, which is kind of ironic because the name of the first globe, literally meaning the earth apple, like a round thing, but it's the earth. Potatoes didn't exist in Europe in 1492. So you make this earth apple, which is a globe, and then you set sail and head to North America, then you end up re-importing potatoes back to Europe, and then the Germans kind of ironically adopted the name earth apple for the potato because crops had been moved across countries. Like Europeans had no idea what corn was, and no idea what potatoes were, no idea what tomatoes are. Those are things that belong in North America. Similarly, honeybees never existed on this continent. Those are brought over from Europe. We also traded diseases. We traded people. We traded all kinds of stuff, and things become very globalized, and it's by transportation on water. Okay, so that's the story about, like, I say how Columbus got lucky. He was lucky there was a continent here. So it was a discovery of a whole continent. But Columbus was also not the first European to ever set foot in North America. There were other explorations that were earlier than Columbus. And in section 2 of chapter 1, I have a information about that. Hold on, let me find Schoolmaster. I gotta click some other buttons here. It's like in school, you learn a lot of what we call mythology, which doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong or a lie, but there are legends about people, and sometimes it's not the entire story. Sometimes the entire story is actually more exciting, and more fulfilling and gives things a better meaning than otherwise. Okay, so there's another map that's also um, common. Hold on, let me find. All right, in the um, in the folder for chapter one, I'm just going to leave it kind of like this. I showed you this yesterday if you were on Zoom, but if you take, and this is in the textbook too, if you take all the water on the earth off the surface of the earth and you put it into like balls or spheres, most of the water on the earth is salt water, a little bit is freshwater ice, and the rest is just water in lakes and rivers. And I mentioned about the Great Lakes system. The Great Lakes system, which is actually just north of here, has the individual lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. 20% of all the fresh water on the earth is in the Great Lakes between between the United States and Canada. And this big blue area is actually the drainage basin. In other words, all the water that falls in this dark blue area drains into the Great Lakes, and it actually flows out through the St. Lawrence River and goes out to Lake, uh, or goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. Another way to see like the ocean in total is about half of the oxygen that's produced today for the Earth's atmosphere comes from the ocean. The water from the ocean covers a huge amount of the surface. It plays a very important role in atmospheric science. So if you studied meteorology, there's an awful lot of talk about the role of the ocean relative to the temperature of the atmosphere and precipitation and whatnot. Most trade travels by ocean, so we trade by ocean. Huge ocean liners travel across all the oceans, moving goods all the time. We've cut huge canals. The ocean provides recreation and food and medicine, all kinds of stuff. All right. So in the study guide, there's a chart that describes or that has some things filled in. There's a pretty good description about the first European who ever set foot in North America. And it's tricky to say what North America is defined to be, but anywhere in the North American continent. And those voyages were much earlier than Christopher Columbus. Columbus is very famous for his like discovery of the Caribbean, and then Ferdinand Magellan and Cook made trips all across the globe. This is another map that's a common one that's seen as an early map. It's right around the time of Christopher Columbus, 3 years before Columbus's voyage. What's called the Heinrich Hammer map, and it also shows pretty clearly like Africa, Europe, and Asia, but as if the Asian continent goes almost all the way around the globe itself. And there's this very small ocean that separates Africa, Europe, and Asia, except we know that's not exactly true anymore. I mean, there's something else there. All right, so if you're remote, I mentioned there's that chapter one, good? There's that chapter one of the textbook is available in our Schoology page. And oh yeah, I've got to arrange for you to be able to pick up a textbook. So if you're a remote student, you should get a textbook. And let me mark this down. I will do it today. So anytime after today, in the main office, you'd be able to come and pick up a textbook. And we need them back, but eventually you can have it there. Let me switch to this thing again. I gotta go here. And click something else. Plan for the week. All right. There's another video that I'm going to show. So if you're a remote student, you can watch this like separately. And then the best thing for the rest of the period, the rest of the day today, is to work on the first two sections of the study guide. In the chapter one folder, we already watched this. How did Polynesian wayfarers navigate? But the second one says sailing across the world's ocean with no technology. We're going to watch that here in class. But if you're remote, then watch this Sailing Across the World's Oceans and work on the first two sections of the study guide. The textbook for the chapter one of the textbook is in the chapter one folder as well. So when I mean the chapter one folder, anytime you click on materials, everything's organized by chapter, and chapter one and two are listed, but chapter one has stuff from this chapter. So this is the study guide and the textbook, but this is the link Sailing Across the World Oceans I want to watch. All right, I'm going to play it on this screen. I got to like find it, sign in. And so when people talk about like spices from East Asia, actually a lot of times it just includes like tea, things like pepper, coriander, and just like regular spices. Stuff you just stop at the dollar store or Wegmans and buy it in a can and you're good to go. But oftentimes those products were very expensive, not only because the getting them and extracting them was difficult, but then also the transportation costs were very high. And in trade, metal goods, other goods have to go back. So part of the reason why it was expensive is that there wasn't much that was considered valuable from Europe to people who live in East Asia. So they would like charge a lot. All right, I don't know why that's not going over there. Maybe it's too big still. Well, that's a bummer. I just have to look up here then, I guess. Oh, I get it. Because that zoom was full screen. I don't think I can drag a window on top. There it goes. All right, let's see if this works.
Hawaii is one of the remote places on the planet. And in the open ocean, there are no landmarks. So Hawaii was discovered by canoes with no GPS, no motors, no electronics, just pure nature. And that's what we're doing today to celebrate that. So we're on Hokulea. She is a replica of a Polynesian voyaging canoe. They were the mode of transportation for discovering the Hawaiian Islands.
There's no metal, there's no screws, there's no nails, there's no braces that hold the canoe together. It's nothing but lashings of rope. There's no motors on board. There's no navigation equipment that we use to go across the ocean. We started in Hawaii in end of May 2014. We embarked on this worldwide voyage, which first ended up going towards Tahiti through our ancestral routes, and now we're here in Martha's Vineyard.
A big part of this voyage, right, Malama Honua, is to train a whole cadre of young navigators and captains.
Wait, leave the back sail. Let's get 23 up.
Khalil Wong is one of the apprentice navigators. I've done 4 voyages with him. He was on his own across the Atlantic Ocean, and he was brilliant. I mean, he was just so successful. After traveling like 1,200 miles, finding just little islands in the middle of nowhere. You're talking like thousands of hours of observation at sea.
When we're navigating the open ocean, our biggest clue that tells us where we are and where we're going is the sun. The sun, as we know, rises in the east and sets in the west. So if we just know where one point of is, then we know where everything else is. The stars do us the same thing. It's like the compass in the sky. We memorize close to 200 stars and know where they rise and where they set and how they move across the skies.
The sun and the stars and everything work in conjunction with the swells. So in the absence of the sun, then you maintain the orientation of the canoe to the swell patterns. That's a very difficult thing. The ukulele was built with the express purpose of proving that navigation by the ancient way was very viable. That these canoes could be guided over 2,000 miles and long distances. They proved that on the very first voyage in 1976. What it means is continuation. Cleo and these others, they're just like a pinch of salt as far as the people who know how to do this type of navigation.
So, if you ever saw Moana, hopefully you have. I mean, if you're into Disney, you've seen Moana. But the Disney movie Moana actually celebrates the idea of these ancient voyages by Polynesians. And in fact, the movie tells the story of how there were, millennia worth of large distance travels, and then around 3,000 years ago, around 1000 BC, that all just kind of stopped. They the islands had been well established, and many Polynesians, which include, people in Tahiti, Hawaii, Indonesia, the Philippines, much of that voyaging just came to a halt. And it's not clear exactly why that happened, but in Moana, they're like, "No, we're done exploring. We're gonna stay." You know what I mean? And she's like, "No, I'm a dip." And they're like, "No, you gotta stay." And that kind of struggles in there. So they don't really like tell the story and the history of large distance exploration by uh, people who lived in um, like the South Pacific, but that's part of the story. That's part of like the bigger story. Anyway, Disney's good at taking a little story and making a couple $100 million on it. You know what I'm talking about? They're like, let's get a story and let's get some computers and make a movie and then make people go watch it. Don't have theme parks and we'll sell costumes and whatever. It's pretty awesome. I'm totally into Disney. If you're into Disney, that's awesome too, because it's great. There's good stories behind everything. The Finding Nemo thing is super cool. That's totally cool to what we do. All right, underneath your desk, there's a copy of the Oceanography book. So if you have, hopefully you have a copy of the study guide. These study guides are going to be very useful and very important because it helps you like organize, take what's all in the text and kind of organize it and break it down into simple ideas. But the first two sections, section 1 and section 2, it's a good place for you to like get your stuff down so that it's all in a nice, neat place to stay mentally organized and whatnot. There's extra. What's that? Study guide? Yep. And there's books along the side. See, like on the shelf? Yep. Yeah, if you ever need a book, there's some, they're usually going to be on the desk, but they're also like on the side along the shelf and whatnot.